Hey, my ADHD family. Welcome to another episode of ADHD Love Parent Talk. I am Yakini. Today, I'm going to be talking to a foster mom about ADHD. And the reason why I wanted to talk to Laura is because there are quite a few foster parents out there who have children that have ADHD and have the same types of questions. And so I wanted to get some of her feedback and just talk about some situations that she deals with and how does she work through them, and just, get another opinion, right? Another thought process. So I am very excited to have her. So hi, Laura, how are you?
Hello, good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yay, I am so glad you are here. So please tell the audience a little bit about you.
So I'm Laura. I'm in California. I'm a foster parent here. I started down my foster parent journey in 2018 and have fostered several kids, but I also moved online. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok, and I work with foster families. I help educate, but also provide support. And ultimately, I learn a lot from the community too.
That is awesome. So please, we're going to jump right in. Oh, before we do that, don't forget to subscribe if you want more information like this. So I try to put something out every week. So please, if you want more content like this, make sure you subscribe. All right. So, as a foster parent, obviously you're dealing with multiple children. So what type of typical situations, especially with your ADHD children, do you deal with?
Yeah, so it varies, right? So it's a very complex situation when a child comes into my care or care of anyone when they have experienced trauma, which is typically neglect, abuse, and they also have a diagnosis of ADHD. So, it's typically, there's these meetings of the minds and a professional team is put in place.
Okay.
There's usually therapy support at school, potentially medication management or a psychiatry team. And, that's what usually happens or gets set up when the child has a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
But I find in my experience, usually kids are not entering care with that type of information. So it's a lot of getting to know the child, providing a, safe, nurturing home for them, and advocating for any needs they may have. And it is complex because there's so much overlap between, trauma and ADHD. So it does take time. But, what I'm really looking for is, how are they doing in school?
Okay.
What are their, behaviors like? Is there anything that's, not something I've seen before? Or, when I talk in support group and get feedback from other parents like yourself, that's sort of what I'm looking for. And that usually happens down the road. It's not right away.
Okay. All right. So when you talk about support, what does that look like? It sounds like you have different things in place, but give us a specific example. Like, what does that support look like? Because of course, like you said, everything, it could be different, depending on the child.
Yeah. So support at school through the IEP process, there's different accommodations that can be there. There's also, mental health services. So maybe the child is getting therapy, and if the therapist, seems that, maybe there's some traits for ADHD, we might start implementing some things in the home, or they help me learn different ways to parent. With or without the diagnosis, we start trying things because, in my opinion, you don't need a diagnosis to support a child who is at least showing traits of ADHD. So maybe we'll come up with a visual schedule together, or maybe we'll reorganize the bedroom to make it more supportive for sleep. So it's usually a therapist who will come in and work with all of us to come up with ways to support them in the home.
I love that. And so what happens? So one of the things that parents in general sometimes have problems with is really getting that support from school, for example. Advocating, it's a scary thing, right? Because sometimes they just do not know what to do, what questions to ask. So you happen to have a system in place, but I'm sure, you might run into those roadblocks too. What would you say to a parent who is struggling with getting that support in school?
So I always lead with curiosity. So if I have the ability to talk with the school, depending on, what rights I have as a foster parent, I always say, what's typical? Yeah, I'm getting this work back. I'm seeing the grades. what are you typically seeing?
Mm,
Where are the benchmarks, or what types of things? I'm getting all these calls from the school that there's behavior problems, or I'm getting a report. Is this normal? Would they benefit from additional help and resources? So I always try to just push back and lead with curiosity.
mhm.
And because again, it's a complex situation. And I usually try to foster a relationship with the teacher.
Okay.
I, try to get to know them and get on the same team, right? Because we're all working towards the same thing,
Mhm.
and see what small changes can be made outside of the IEP experience. Even what tiny things could be, implemented in a classroom. For example, I had a teacher once who was like, you know what, I have this extra kind of one of those wiggle seats. I'm just gonna have them sit on it for
Mm.
a couple weeks and just see what happens. Teachers want to help. And I think if you go in it with that mindset, like, we're all in this together, let's figure this out. Oftentimes accommodations can be tried
Yeah.
in a more informal setting. The IEP process is big and daunting. And as a foster parent, we are sometimes left out of that. And
Mm.
so, I always try to just work with what I have, and, start with a relationship and a connection with the teachers.
I really like that. And to your point, every child isn't diagnosed. So depending on the school
Mhm.
system, some are really supportive with those children that are diagnosed versus someone that isn't, right? But it
Yes.
doesn't mean you can't get the support. So both of my children happen to be diagnosed, but only one of them is on an actual official plan, right? So one of them
Mhm.
is on the IEP. But it didn't mean that when I sat down with the school counselor with my daughter just to talk through some of her struggles, they
Yeah.
were still willing to put things in place for her.
Yes.
And that's just
Yes.
because, to your point, just having that conversation ahead of time. So in my case, it was before school even started. So having that
Mhm.
conversation ahead of time, going into this new school system and going into seventh grade, and really just being open with what was going on with my daughter
Yeah.
helped tremendously, because to your point, she was ready. She says, okay, this makes sense. We can do this. We can do this. I'll make sure all of
Yes.
the teachers know. And we ended up not having to put her on any type of plan, well, formal plan, because that
Mhm.
worked perfectly for her. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yes, just approaching the topic is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, and I will sometimes share stuff that's worked for us. And it
Mhm.
kind of creates this like back and forth share. Cause, I've had a teacher, call me about something positive. And I'm like, oh, that's wonderful. Now I can try that at home, or I can, um, you know, start to implement or accommodate it in a different way at home.
Yeah, I love that. So, there are a lot of people that are nervous about talking to their kids about ADHD, or even being
Mhm.
open about it in the home, right? Especially around other kids, might be, around their spouse, just depending on what the situation is. Are you open when it comes to ADHD? Do you guys talk about ADHD in your home? Why or why not?
Yeah. So I think that is one positive thing that I, definitely see with the professional teams I work with is we're all honest with the kids. Obviously, we have to make everything age appropriate and, be clear in what's that. But yes, we talk about that. And you know, kids in care have gone through a lot, and we've had a lot of harder conversations,
Mm,
and we talk about the differences in all of us, and the things we need might be different than what another kid needs or what
yeah.
I need. And so we are open about it.
Okay,
we
good.
we always approach it in positive with books to support,
Mm,
or some different like YouTube things. A therapist might have little one to show here and there.
mm,
But I think it's important that kids understand their diagnoses, at least foster kids. That's what I can speak of.
mhm,
And they need to be involved in the process. And again, every child and family is different.
mhm.
And depending on what else is going on in the child's life, timing has to be appropriate.
Yeah.
But um, I don't know. I'm always a proponent of open conversation. Kids get it. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes we don't give them enough credit. They have an understanding. Sometimes even there's like these aha moments that can occur. and kids can, instead of blaming themselves or feeling the shame
Yeah.
of something, we can now channel and point to something different, and we have a plan of helping and, working through things.
I love that. And then, especially amongst the kids, sometimes, so like my children for a long time, my daughter was diagnosed second, even though I started the process with my daughter. My son ended up being diagnosed first for a long time, right? And something weird, I mean, well, I won't say it's weird, it's probably pretty normal, but my daughter was just kind of, it was almost like a little bit of a jealousy because my son was getting now all the attention, right?
Oh,
Because we were putting
interesting.
things in place, and
Mhm.
he was displaying the outwardly, the outwardly, I will say, symptoms, like the
Mhm.
tantrums, et cetera, and doing that
Yeah.
in school. And my daughter started off that way, but she just, I mean, when she was 6 years old, it just kind of stopped, where my son, it just continued. And
Mm.
so he was getting the attention, even though it was negative attention. And she was a bit jealous about that, right? How do you deal with, and even though we talked about it and she understood, she just saw for a long time him getting this attention.
Mhm.
How do you deal with, because you're dealing with foster kids, and to your point, they're coming in with so many different situations. So, attention, I don't know how your home is set up, but sometimes attention may go
Mhm.
to one child a little bit more than the
Yep.
other. How
Yep.
do you deal with those type of situations? How do you help them understand what's going on with their home brother or sister? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. It can be hard. And I've definitely seen that as well. Now that you bring it up, I'm sort of thinking back to a few times where I've seen that happening. But, you know, we try to balance as much as we can, right? So I have a husband. And so oftentimes when one person we can divide and conquer a little bit. Like when one person has to do a service, the other person can do something else special.
Okay.
And so we do a lot of that. I will say also, I put things in perspective, oh, well, child one, they have OT at the gym, but you get to do this other thing. And, I try to like show them some other things going on, but also life is not fair. And we do, these conversations do come up, and I always validate, right? So, I'm there, I listen, I am there to just take it in, because oftentimes, all of the time, life is not fair for foster kids.
Mm.
And so we do have to have a lot of conversations about just kind of sitting in those moments, and doing what we can in those moments to be calm and have peace. And, I try to redirect to happier things and
Okay.
something more exciting, but I don't know. I also I'm here to validate and hear them
Mhm.
out. And yeah, things are not fair sometimes.
Yeah. Understood. So what would you say to parents if they're even struggling on whether they should get their child diagnosed or not? So they really want to get
Mhm.
this official diagnosis, but they're scared of the stigma and just everything that comes around it, a lot of the negativity that they've heard. What would you say to them if they do want a diagnosis and they're
Yeah. So I
struggling
would,
whether to decide, if they would want to get it for
yeah,
the child or
yeah.
not? Yeah.
So lean on the professionals in your life, your pediatrician, the teachers, and understand what doors potentially would open with a formal diagnosis. Now, I'm always really careful as a foster parent. We don't want to overdiagnose because of a trauma response we're seeing.
Mhm.
But I also am thinking forward, they need to be successful in school. They need to have a happy, calm life as best they can. And so I always look for the advice of the team, right? So if
Okay.
there is a mental health therapist, what do they suggest? The
Mhm.
pediatrician, oftentimes, your physicals and your check-ins, you can ask these questions. What do you think? And they might be able to share with you what can be done without a diagnosis. Here are
Mhm.
some things to
Mhm.
try if you're if can't get a diagnosis, because foster parents, we don't have power over being able to get those assessments.
Mm.
Um, but they can also share with you, with that diagnosis, it will be much easier to get support in school, for
Okay.
example. And that can help sway you in, how you advocate, right? Because as foster parents, we're here to advocate and support. And so I like to kind of understand what happens next if, a certain diagnosis is now put on paper, because it does change things. And foster kids often are overdiagnosed. This is my opinion. I just think that, it's easy to slap a diagnosis on when you're seeing all these kind of trauma related responses. So I always, encourage time and lean on professionals and understanding what will happen next. Because if you're not going to change your parenting, you're already doing all the accommodations. You don't really need further diagnosis. You know what you're doing. Where it really comes into play as a foster parent is school. I find that's kind of the biggest place where that diagnosis can really help kids in school.
Okay. All right. So the system is really set up differently for foster parents. So that really is a piece that comes into play anyhow, right? That's my understanding.
Yeah. Now, yeah. So if I'm noticing things or I'm seeing, I have concerns or I'm seeing traits that maybe look a little different than what I'm used to, I will ask for an assessment. I will ask for a mental health professional's opinion and advocate for that. But ultimately, I don't have say in that. We don't have those rights. And so it is different. But if I come with, here are my reasons, and here's my documentation, and here's the reports from the school. These are all the reasons why I think we should at least get a professional to weigh in and see what's going on. Then I can advocate for those referrals to be submitted and work with the team. It is different, but there's pros and cons of every diagnosis. I always find that getting a true diagnosis and understanding your child is always helpful in your parenting.
Okay, very good, very good. So are there any resources that you use just really to help you? Any books, YouTube channels, anything that you use as a foster parent that helps you work with your children?
So I am, I follow lots of, like yourself, creators on Instagram and TikTok that are kind of just sharing everyday, tips and things to try. Cause I'm like, I'll try it, we'll see what happens. But we also, I have access to a lot of formal trainings through the foster care system. So we get free trainings, and they are often about IEPs or ADHD or different neurotypes and disabilities and all of that. And so that's usually where I turn. Is I would say to my case manager, I really am, I'm seeing these things. I need to learn more as a caregiver. What do you suggest? And oftentimes there's a training that kind of gets spit back, and I can at least take that, or it's online. But I am definitely one of those people still that follows online and tries to just, try a new product or a new game or something to help. Kind of changes depending on the child and where we're at and what we're struggling with.
And depending on the age, and
yes. So many things.
Right, exactly. Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we may have missed? Any final thoughts that you would like to share with the parents?
No, I think that this is important to learn about, and you should be aware of all of, the traits or the symptoms, things to look out for. I don't think it's everyday knowledge, and it does affect, at least in the foster care world, many children. And so it's important that you take the time to at least get a basic knowledge and understanding of what this means, what you're looking for, and then ultimately how you can modify your own parenting. It's just good to be informed, and then you're ready.
Love it. So Laura, if they want to ask you any more questions or just want to bounce some thoughts off of you, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I do respond to almost all of my DMs. It takes me some time. People are welcome to message me, but to get the best response from me, I have a Patreon account. It's as low as $1 a month. I try to make it accessible to all, and it's much easier for me to respond directly to people and bounce off ideas with them, right? Because we're all just trying to, work through our week, take it day by day. And I'm always happy to help brainstorm ideas.
All
And
right.
also navigate. If there's specifically people who are foster parents, I'm more than happy to help brainstorm ways to advocate the system to support a child with ADHD.
Perfect. And what are your handles and what's your account? So what is your handle for the different ones?
So Instagram it's the same for Patreon and Instagram at foster.parenting. You can also find me on TikTok. That's just at foster parenting.
Okay. Yay. Well, thank you.
Awesome.
That was really good. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Hopefully we can, help all families and caregivers.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is really important topic. It's one thing that people don't realize. There is differences, right? There is differences when it comes to foster families in terms of rules.
Yes.
Than it is with those who, whether they adopt or whether it's their guardians, or biological children, there are differences. So I'm so glad that you were willing to come on and talk about this.
Yeah,
So
of course. No, I'm happy to share, and it's definitely something I've dealt with in the house. So
awesome. All right, everyone, that closes up another episode of ADHD Love Parent Talk. Again, if you want more content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell, because every time a video comes out, you will be notified. And if you like this video, hit that like button. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day. Bye. Bye, Laura.